Hey, welcome to In the Spread. I'm Captain Chad Bryson, and today we're going to talk about my top 5 favorite flies for big trophy brown trout. And, when we talk about trophy brown trout, a lot of people measure a trophy in different means and different ways. The way I prefer to measure a trophy brown trout is in pounds and not inches. And so to really understand that what you're pursuing, the big brown trout, you have to understand their diet. And while all of us that fly fish at some point in our lives, we've always been enamored with bugs and insect hatches and what trout eat, and that certainly is a solid and viable part of their diet. But with brown trout, once they reach a certain age and a certain maturity level, they make a switch. There's a genetic switch that flips, and they decide to either start eating other fish or larger invertebrates like crawfish, or they stay on an insect diet. And so the ones that stay on the insect diet may live to be 10 years old and only be this big, because that's all the protein that the insect or invertebrate diet will afford them. However, when the brown trout that make the decision to switch over to meat and eat some food with some protein, when they switch over, you may catch a 10-year-old one that's this big, pushing high 20s into the low 30 inches, weighing 10 to 12 pounds. And certainly a lot of our tailwater rivers in the southeast have brown trout that exceed those numbers dramatically. Today we're on the Chattahoochee River below Buford Dam near Atlanta, Georgia. It's my home river. It's my favorite place to fish for large brown trout, and there's a lot more of them in here than the good people of Atlanta and surrounding will ever give it credit for. But my favorite flies to pursue these fish, and it depends on conditions. There's a lot of things that give me the reason why I would use one fly in a certain color over another. And as I go through these, you're going to see a lot of similarities, and you're going to see a lot of influence from other great fly tyers out there. I'm never going to profess that I'm the best fly tyer, and I'm certainly never going to profess that I am the best at catching big brown trout, but I've done a lot of it, and I am pretty good, and I enjoy it, and it's one of my favorite things to do in the South. But as we go through these flies, you'll see a lot of influence from other great fly tyers, and what I've done is taken some of it and twisted around and made it my own little way, which is what all of us do. That's what makes fly tying so great. So I'm going to start first by saying that when I have a really clear water situation where I'm almost sight fishing to some big fish, I really like to fish some sort of a crawfish pattern, something that's not too big and obnoxious, that you can kind of gently and subtly pitch between their nose. This is a Jesus lizard tied by Umpqua. It was originally, sold and marketed as a warm water fly for smallmouth and bass and that sort of thing. But brown trout eat crawfish, and I think everybody knows that. And this little guile, the tail wiggles. It gives a lot of action. It's got some dumbbell eyes to help the fly get down so that you can almost present it in a saltwater flats type situation, like you would with redfish or bonefish or something similar. But it comes in a lot of different colors. I like the orange and brown because it seems to work the best for me, but it's available in olive and black. And if you're tying your own, don't be afraid to experiment with any color combination that you feel good about, because having the confidence in what you've tied and what you've made yourself will make you fish that fly better, and it will always make you more successful with it as long as you have confidence in it. But that's the Jesus lizard, and that's usually what I'll start out with in a really clear water situation where I'm sight fishing. And then one of the staple items that I always have, this is a fly that's going to look really familiar to a lot of people. This is Kelly Gallup's Sex Dungeon, and it's basically a sculpin type pattern. And pretty much I never ever go fishing without one of these tied onto at least one of my rods in the boat, because it has the deer hair head gives it a lot of side to side action. It's an articulated fly, and in some cases when a really big fly, big obnoxious fly, like I'm going to show you in a minute, when a big obnoxious fly scares fish or will spook fish that have been pressured, you can come in with the Sex Dungeon or even the Jesus lizard and catch those fish. So it's a great fly. Kelly Gallup, originally from Traverse City, Michigan, now in Montana. That's his fly, and you should go to his site and look it up. And then another fly that I use in a clear water situation. This is one of my own ties. It's not a complicated tie at all, but I call this one the Filthy Beggar. And it's again an articulated fly with a number 4 hook in the front and a number 6 hook in the back. It's just got a fish skull helmet on it with some rabbit fur. It's really not complicated to tie. It's basically tying a woolly bugger and attaching it to another woolly bugger type hook with a helmet on it. And it works really good, again, when you don't want to be too obnoxious and too boisterous to the fish that you're trying to catch. Maybe in a freestone river where you're not fishing from a boat, where you know that there's a lot of brown trout, and you just want to make a little more delicate presentation. The Filthy Beggar will work. So those are 3 smaller flies in the grand scheme of what we're really talking about. Those 3 flies are a little bit smaller than what I would typically use, but they're still effective and some of my favorites. But what I find to work more often than not, day in and day out, is a version of the Great Lakes Deceiver. This is a Great Lakes Deceiver tied by my buddy Miles Klusing. I work with him in Alaska, and he's a great fly tyer and a great fisherman, and probably one of the greatest guides I've ever met. But this is his version of it, and it catches fish without a doubt. It really does catch fish. And so I took his version of it, of the traditional Great Lakes Deceiver, and for here on the Chattahoochee, because a lot of times the bait fish that we're trying to imitate for these brown trout, a lot of times the bait fish are a little bigger than this, and so you need a little bigger profile to really get the attention of the 36-inch brown that you really want to catch. So I took Miles's fly and I made some changes to it, and I kind of created my own version of that Deceiver. And as you can see, mine's a little bit bigger, still articulated, but it's a little bit bigger and has a little taller profile. I'm using the fish skull mask on the front, and that kind of helps to break up the water, break a disturbance in it, with a nice articulation in the back. And the key to the articulation is that you have to control the materials on the rear hook in comparison to the amount of materials on the front hook, and that way it makes the fly turn and stop as you're stripping it. And if you want to learn more about how to tie these flies and how to fish them, you can check out our fly tying video as well, where I really go into depth about the type of materials to buy, the type hooks, feathers, how to select it and be selective about what you're doing, and the material usage while you're using your flies. It'll save you a lot of money and hopefully save you a lot of time on the learning curve on how to tie these huge flies. But this is one that, again, one of the, I guess, it doesn't have a name, but I guess we're going to call it the Chattahoochee Deceiver, because that's what I tied it for. So, but this one's in peach and olive, and I find also that the transition colors, having a contrast difference in the colors with the olive and the peach, really works, just like you see in Miles's fly with the brown and the yellow. Really makes a big difference. And so on a clear water situation, on a low sun, I'll probably use something like this that's a little more subtle, just so I'm not scaring the hell out of them trying to get them to eat. And then this one again is another version of the Chattahoochee Deceiver. And you can see I've got the olive across the top on the back. It's articulated. The color, or the materials on this fly are a little more sparse. It's a little more sparsely tied, and the reason I did that was so that this fly doesn't absorb too much water and it'll sink a lot quicker. But you see I've still got the fish skull mask and some fluorescent yellow bucktail for the bottom. So you're going to see a trend here with some of my colors and styles, and there's a lot of brown and yellow. There's a very good reason for that, is that, like I talked about before, brown trout decide at some point in their life that they're going to make the switch over to eating meat. And so when they make that switch, they decide they're just going to eat whatever they can find. And a lot of times what they find are their own young, their own offspring, or their neighbor's offspring, but they're eating their own. They're eating their own baby brown trout because it's a great source of protein. There's a lot of them in the river. Anywhere that's any tailwater river in the southeast or anywhere through the country that has a significant brown trout population is always going to have a lot of baby brown trout. And so when you go through anybody's catalogs and anybody's fly boxes, you're going to find a whole lot of yellow for big browns. And it works. It works in off-colored water situations. It works in bright sun and clear water situations too, when you got aggressive fish that are actively feeding. So that's a good one. And here it is, the super bright yellow Chattahoochee Deceiver, and I've tied this one up with a little bit of musky schlappen here on the back to give it a different contrasting profile. But just a standard yellow on the top and then a fluorescent yellow on the bottom, again with the fish mask. And basically the deer hair, I mean, this is all musky type bucktail is what you want to use. And I go through how to select those bucktails and what you're looking for in the fly tying video. So you might check that out and see if it can help you save some time and money. But basically I tie these in a Popovich style, is how I spin the hair and attach it to the hooks. But this fly, the yellow, solid yellow with the fluorescent bottom, it's good to go. It really does the job. So. And then there's the other times when and I hate the term because what we're doing here is not matching the hatch, but it's a common term in fly fishing. It's a term that we all have used and still do use to some degree. And what it means is you're emulating whatever bug hatch is coming off. And so that's been construed now into a way that we use that term, match the hatch, in regards to feeding the trout or whatever fish we're fishing for. We use that term to say that we're going to give that fish exactly what they're feeding on in the river. And so a lot of times, like we covered with the baby brown trout, but a lot of times the hatchery rainbow fish, the hatcheries can grow rainbow trout a lot quicker and faster and healthier than they can grow brown trout to stock in rivers. And so a lot of times you have wild brown trout living in a tailwater where there's going to be a hatchery supported rainbow trout fishery, and the brown trout will absolutely gorge on them. I mean, it's your standard 9-inch rainbow trout, your stocked fish that the truck comes up and dumps in from the boat ramps anywhere that you fish. Brown trout are eating those. And if you don't believe me and you don't think so, get on the hatchery schedule with their stocking and go and just watch at some of the bridge crossings and the boat ramps when the hatchery truck pulls in and all those rainbows come into the river. Go and watch and see if a huge brown trout doesn't come from somewhere to eat a 9-inch rainbow trout. You'll be amazed, and it's a great way to start your trophy brown trout fishing. This fly was also tied by one of my buddies in Michigan, James Johnson. I worked for his dad, and I worked for James up there in Alaska for several years. And again, he's one of the best guides and fishermen that I've been around, just like Miles. But this particular fly, he was fishing with me down here back in the winter, and this fly he tied had the most incredible action of anything else he had in his box. And so he fished it all day, and he was nice enough to leave it with me. But it's a great fly, and I've caught a couple of big browns on it. And but you see the pattern going here with the rainbow trout replica. So at other times during the year, we'll go to a different color scheme and something a little more obnoxious and a little more aggressive looking. And this fly, again, this is just another version of my Chattahoochee Deceiver that's really kind of pimped out, I guess, if you will. But I got a lot of flash in here, as long as a lot more slopping feathers. And articulated again just one time with the fish skull mask. And what I'm doing with this fly at certain times during the year, when the tributary creeks start to get really cold in the wintertime, a lot of these bait fish, the shad type pattern bait fish, will come out of those creeks and into the Chattahoochee River or any river anywhere, because the big river will actually be a few degrees warmer than the tributary creek. And so, being a warm water fish, they want the warmest water they can find. So they're in the river, they're in the big part of the tailwater during that time, and I'll fish these shad type patterns and have a lot of success. And it's also in the winter, as before mentioned, when maybe a big brown trout isn't feeding as much during the day as he would spring, summer, and fall. And so a lot of times a big, nasty, disgusting pattern will get his attention as an easy meal that maybe he can eat this once or twice a day and be satisfied. So certainly does have its place, but it's a great color combination with a little bit of flash, and draws a lot of attention in the winter months. So that's it. I hope this helps you, and the name of the game is to try and share everything with everybody as much as you can, because I'm a guide and I've been a guide for most of my life, but there's a lot of people that don't want to hire a guide, and there's a lot of people that just want to go out and try and figure it out on their own because it gives them a lot more rewarding pleasure. And so check out everything in the spread, because that's what we do, is try and share everything and bring it all to you on a top end basis so that you can get it squared away for yourself and go have a great fishing day. Thanks a lot.